child, and we celebrate her birthday every year on the basis if you don't attack the day will attack you. And we had to stop the children when they were much younger. 5 children is a big family, and we'd be I remember one occasion at the checkout at a supermarket, and the very nice lady behind the checkout said, "Oh, you've got a big family. How many of you are there?" And our eldest said, 6, but one's with Jesus in heaven, in the most sort of normal voice. And the poor lady had no idea where to put herself. And we had to sort of support her.
That's a nice way to put it, in the sense that we must be wary that the absence doesn't expand and eat up all the oxygen, because there are other people involved in this.
Absolutely.
And I've seen it happen in that way, that there becomes almost a sort of deification of the absence.
Yes.
And people feel it's almost wrong to sort of turn away from the absence. And I just think you need to be able to find a way to do that.
And you mustn't use up all the bandwidth on the absence.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
That's just a word of warning.
But you do a lot in your blog site, the Red Ant Files.
Yeah.
In that, you do a lot of, not so much advising or counselling, but just encouragement and seeking to share and enabling people to just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, the Red Hand Files was never meant to be that. The Red Hand Files was just a sort of forum where you could ask me questions and I'd answer them in a considered way, let's say. And it just grew into something. It's been going for 4 years or so. The really beautiful thing about the Red Hand Files is that people write in about someone who's died and how sad they are and how it's affecting them. And you're reading them and you realise this person died 15 years ago.
Yes.
And this is extraordinarily moving to me, that it's clear that this person has nowhere else to go with this information, because grief has a sell-by date. We don't want to just be going on and on and on about this stuff, and nor should we. But they're very moving, these letters, especially from people who are missing someone who, a family member that died 10 years ago or something like that.
No, I think that's right. Just coming back to the creativity, and obviously Ghosteen is widely seen as a major change in how you were writing, what you were writing. It was very expressive, and it is utterly beautiful. To what extent was it consciously, I'm going to do things differently, or did you just find that the whole creative process, there'd been a tectonic shift in what went on?
Yeah, I mean, musically that was happening anyway. But with that particular record, I felt at that time that if there was something I could do to, it's difficult to describe, but improve the general condition of my own life and the condition of my son who died's existence or non-existence, it would be through the making of some kind of music, and to be able to speak into that, speak back into life about this situation. And that record just grew out of that.
So it was partly conscious, partly just...
Well, we weren't trying to make a record about this particular subject or anything.
No.
It's just...
Things write themselves to some degree.
I don't like to give someone else credit for it, because I sit down and slave every day. But the song arrives at a place that, even though I put an enormous amount of effort into it, I don't really feel I had any control over that destination. I have to say that I feel at an advantage in regard to the business of songwriting, that I acknowledge or accept that there may be a kind of divine presence, or that my songs are reaching into the divine. I think that's a distinct advantage I have as a songwriter.
Thank you very much, Nick.
It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
It's been an honour to speak to you. Great pleasure.
Thank
you very much. You've been listening to The Documentary from the BBC World Service. This episode of Heart and Soul was presented by me, Justin Welby, and the producer was Dan Tierney.
Hi, I'm Claire Graham.
And I'm the BBC World Affairs editor, John Simpson.
And we'd like to tell you about a new podcast from the BBC World Service, The Expert.
Good evening, and welcome to NYC Now. I'm Janae Pierre for WNYC. Smoke from Canadian wildfires is once again passing through the New York City region, and it could linger around much of the state through Friday. Governor Kathy Hochul says, although we've seen worse, it's worth being careful.
The numbers at this moment do not seem to be trending to be as high as they were 3 weeks ago, when the skies were literally orange, but there are still significant public health risks.
Hochul says senior citizens and those with heart conditions or respiratory illnesses should take precautions, like limiting their time outdoors and avoiding strenuous activities. The governor says it's too soon to say whether the air quality will be affected for the 4th of July. She urged New Yorkers to check the latest conditions in their area before holding any outdoor celebrations. The U.S. Supreme Court has shut down race-conscious admissions programs at the nation's colleges and universities. WNYC's Arun Venugopal has some of the local reaction to the key ruling on affirmative action.
Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez said, by ending affirmative action, this court has enshrined racial inequality in our education system. While Bethany Lee of the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund said today's decision asserts the false myth of colorblindness to undermine an important tool to correcting education disparities. However, the New Jersey-based Asian American Coalition for Education, which represents 360 organizations, called it a historic victory for Asians and all Americans, and said it would monitor the implementation of the decision starting today.
Stick around, there's more after the break. Earlier this month, Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie failed to bring a widely supported bill that would have let New York City lower its speed limit up for a vote. Now, Hastie says his reasoning had little to do with the bill itself. WNYC's Stephen Nesson has the details.
The bill called Sammy's Law would allow New York City lawmakers to lower the speed limit to 20 miles per hour in some areas without approval from Albany. It passed the Senate. It had support from Governor Hochul and Mayor Adams, as well as 60 co-sponsors. But Hastie never even brought it up for a vote. He tells WNYC that some members of the Assembly representing New York City wouldn't vote on it because they were more concerned about unrelated traffic issues, such as where the city's Department of Transportation installs speed bumps and the growing number of e-bikes across the 5 boroughs.
There seems to be no enforcement on how to deal with e-bikes.
Amy Cohen's son Sammy was killed by a driver in 2013. The bill is named after him. Earlier this month, she went on a hunger strike for several days as the legislative session in Albany neared its end. She said by her count, 99 out of 150 Assembly members told her they'd back the bill. That's enough for it to pass. She even confronted Hastie about it. He told her he couldn't do anything. He just has one vote.
What kind of a leader is he to say that he only has one vote? He had the authority to bring this bill to a vote and he failed to do so.
Hastie said he would bring Sammy's Law up for a vote next year if it gets support from more Assembly members from New York City.
That's WNYC's Stephen Nesson. It's summertime, and New York City's public pools are officially open, despite an ongoing lifeguard shortage. Last week, the Parks Department said they were short about 900 lifeguards compared to pre-pandemic hiring levels. And because of that, at least 3 public pools will be closed, given the constraints. New York City has some of the state's strictest training guidelines for lifeguards working at public pools and beaches. Meanwhile, neighboring counties with more relaxed requirements have hired enough lifeguards for the summer. The city's policy funnels lifeguard training through a program run by District Council 37.
Bedtime story. The generator hums like a distant Dongonzik. It's early evening and time, like the dog it is hungry for food and will be fed. Don't doubt it. Will be fed, my small one. The forest begins to gather its silences in. The meadow regroups and hunkers down for its cleft feet. Something is wringing the rag of sunlight inexorably out and hanging. Something is making the reeds bend and cover their heads. Something is licking the shadows up and stringing the blank spaces along, filling them in. Something is inching its way into our hearts, scratching its blue nails against the wall there. Should we let it in? Should we greet it as it deserves, hands on our ears, mouths open? Or should we bring it a chair to sit on and offer it meat? Should we turn on the radio? Should we clap our hands and dance the something dance, the welcoming something dance? I think we should, love. I think we should.
On this Selected Shorts, a few of my favorite things. Books, words, and a trip to a beloved indie bookstore.
Do you have a particular way that you hand sell a book?
The most sure way, I think, is you have just read a book, you have loved it, and someone has asked you what to read, and you're like, oh my God, you have got to read this. You literally put the book in your hand.
I'm Ed Wolitzer. Stay with me. You're listening to Selected Shorts, where our greatest actors transport us through the magic of fiction, one short story at a time. Newsflash, here at Selected Shorts, we love books. And I especially love books. And most importantly, the words they contain. You know how during a Zoom you might try and look at the books on the shelf behind the person's head? Or is it just me who does that? Books are exciting, low-tech, no-tech objects. If you see your favorite book on someone else's shelf, you immediately connect with that book and that person. It's as if we're always in conversation with these inanimate objects and the people who read them. And great stories often ask us to read between the lines. So on this show, a booknanza, 2 stories about the importance of books and words and what they reveal both on the surface and under it. In one, a contrarian book becomes a literary sensation. In the other, words help a troubled man control his world. And we'll have a reader's adventure at 3 Lives and Company.
Small spaces, especially bookstores, especially our bookstore, which is sort of covered floor to ceiling in books, wooden shelves. They're cozy, they're inviting, they're welcoming, especially with the right lighting, the right ceiling, wooden floors. You feel enveloped, you feel taken care of.
3 Lives is one of my old haunts. No, I did not say it's a haunted bookstore, but that's a great premise for a short story if ever I heard one. Stay tuned for more on this special space for words and word lovers at the end of the show.
In the book are blank. Every single one. Sees a man reading the book on the subway. She gets right there on the cover, manager says. This book has no words, and it is in the book are blank. And returns from the store with an armload of books.
Premise, as you'll hear in a minute. The book is performed by Shorts regular Jane Kasmerick, whose credits include her Emmy-winning work on Malcolm in the Middle, Long Day's Journey into Night, and the series The Changeling.
The woman returns from the store with an armload of books. She reads them quickly, one by one, over the course of the next few weeks. But when she opens the last one, the woman frowns in surprise. All of the pages in the book are blank. Every single one. The woman takes the book back to the store, but the manager won't let her return it. Right there on the cover, manager says, this book has no words, and it is not returnable. Well, the woman is angry. She wouldn't have bought the book if she'd known there were no words inside. But the manager simply will not relent. The woman leaves in a huff. She throws the book in the trash. A few days later, the woman sees a man reading the book on the subway. She gets mad. She screams across the crowded floor. "There are no words inside. You can't read it," she says. But the man becomes defensive. "You can pretend," he says. "There's no law against pretending." "I think there might be words if you look at it under a special light," says a woman sitting nearby. This woman is holding her own copy of the book. "That is so stupid," the woman yells. "Don't you see how stupid that is? Don't you understand? That's crazy." At the next station, a policeman is called and has to break up the fight. A television crew arrives at the scene. The woman is interviewed. She appears on the news. She complains loudly about the book for some time. The next day, the book appears on the bestseller lists under both fiction and nonfiction. The woman is furious, enraged, appalled. She calls into a radio show and starts to rant. She calls the next day and the day after that and the day after that. She appears again on television, this time in a debate with the author. "Your book is a joke!" Sits there and smiles. The woman becomes famous for opposing the book. She even writes a book of her own. Her book cries out for the of the first book. In answer, the first book's sales jump. And then one day, a man on the street comes up to her and spits in the woman's face. The woman stands there, shocked, paralyzed, realized that everyone hated her. She turns and runs, sobbing, all the way home. She locks the door and collapses on the floor. She crawls into the bedroom on her hands and knees and hides beneath the blankets. She huddles in the darkness all night long, her hands over her eyes, crying. The following morning, the woman unplugs her phone. She doesn't want to be invited on TV anymore. She sits on the edge of her bed for a while, and then slowly, she rises. The woman turns over a whole new leaf. She turns her attention to other things. She takes up hobbies. She goes scuba diving. She even makes some friends. Without the controversy the woman's anger stirred up, the book starts to slip from the bestseller list. It slips and slips for weeks and weeks until one day it finally disappears. The woman's own book disappears as well. The woman doesn't even notice. The years go by. The woman meets a man. She falls in love, she gets married. She has children, and she raises them and lets them go and watches them start families of their own. She and her husband go through some hard times, but in the end, they stay together. And then one day,
yeah, this nigga is dead to me. So, what exactly is it about black folks and the prospect of making millions, if not billions of dollars that will cause so many of us to line up to sell our souls to the highest bidder? I mean, maybe the fact that white folks have been doing that with our bodies for about 4 centuries or so is something of a precedent, but that's not my point.
This is a story of deceit, manipulation, lots of money, political lobbying, lawsuits, and ultimately covert theft. The history of the internet has been one of big capital pilfering from public investment and national infrastructure, the expropriation of academic research, of democratic open source alternatives being forced illegally from the market, of devices to steal our privacy for profit being quickly snuck into our homes, our cars, our watches, glasses, and phones. It's a story of unethical business practices, of monopoly power, a story that could have been different, and, in the end, a story of competing dreams, hopes for the future. It's a big history, one that needs to be told properly, and one in which that verb, to steal, will be returned to. Stealing can happen in many ways, through force, through dispossession, through tricks, power and cash, of physical infrastructure, and ideas, attention and privacy can be stolen as much as hardware and
land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh why can't I?
In the 1920s and 30s, movie houses became temples of the new Hollywood religion. Jewish values made kitsch. 75% of all Americans went to the movies at least once a week.
This kind of movie-going was religious because it had to do with worship. It had to do with the screen being larger than you were, and you being in awe of what you were looking at, and feeling a certain reverence for it. And so there was, maybe you could say, a bogus spirituality, but it was a spirituality still that was believed in.
Star Norma